The courtroom was alive with energy, but it was the kind of energy that felt like a pressure cooker waiting to burst. The air was thick with anticipation, and even the subtle hum of the ceiling fans seemed to be a reminder of the tense moment that hung in the room. Emma sat in the front row, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face remained an image of calm. She was barely 13, but her composure belied her age. Beside her, sitting obediently on the floor, was Max, her loyal service dog. Max had been by Emma's side since she was a young child. He wasn't just a pet. He was her protector, her confidant, the one constant in a life that had often been filled with uncertainty. His golden fur shined under the harsh courtroom lights, and his eyes, warm and understanding, followed Emma's every move. There was no mistaking the bond between them. It was a connection that went beyond words. The trial had been grueling, the accusations against Emma serious. She was accused of a crime she didn't commit, one that had the potential to change the course of her life forever. Her lawyer, a seasoned professional, had done his best to make a case for her innocence. But as the day dragged on and the weight of the evidence mounted, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the odds were stacked against her. The prosecuting attorney had delivered his closing arguments with a fierce conviction, painting Emma as a liar, a deceiver, and someone who couldn't be trusted. The words stung, but Emma didn't allow herself to show any emotion. She knew her truth, and that was all that mattered. Her only hope now was that the judge would see through the prosecutor's claims and recognize the gaps in the evidence. But as the judge, a man known for his stern demeanor and unshakable sense of authority, began to prepare his final ruling, Emma felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She shifted in her seat, glancing at Max, who remained still and composed, as always. His presence was a source of quiet strength for her, but today it felt different. She could sense something was about to change, something beyond the trial, beyond the case. The air in the courtroom seemed to grow heavier, as if it were pregnant with something unspoken. The judge's gavel hovered above the bench. The tension in the room was palpable. All eyes were on him, waiting for him to make his decision. But Emma's attention was focused entirely on Max. She could feel a pull, a sense of urgency she couldn't explain, as if Max was trying to tell her something. A secret message, maybe, or perhaps a warning. The faintest flick of Emma's fingers, almost imperceptible to anyone but Max, was all it took. You said, Emma's bond with Max wasn't something you could explain easily. It was as though they shared a language only they understood, no words, no gestures, just an instinctive connection that ran deep. Max wasn't just any dog. He was her emotional anchor, the one being in the world who could sense when something was wrong, when her anxiety spiraled, when her world felt like it was closing in. He had been by her side through every dark moment of her life, always knowing when she needed him most. When Emma was younger, she had struggled to speak to others. Her words would often get caught in her throat, tangled in the emotions she couldn't express. But Max was different. He never judged her for her silences. He simply stood by her, always patient, always understanding. And over the years, they had developed a unique way of communicating, a glance, a subtle shift in posture, a barely perceptible signal. Emma didn't have to say a word for Max to know exactly what she needed. It was as if they were two halves of a whole. But today, as she sat in the courtroom, that bond felt stronger than ever. The oppressive silence, the pressure of the trial, the fear of an unjust verdict, it was all beginning to weigh on her. She could feel it in her chest, that familiar tightness that came when anxiety and uncertainty threatened to consume her. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly, and she felt Max's eyes on her. Max had been trained as a service dog for years, but his training wasn't just about fetching things or providing physical assistance. It was about understanding the emotional cues that Emma couldn't always express. And today, something was different. Max's senses were sharper than ever, his training tuned to perfection, and he was aware of the shift in the atmosphere. Something was off. The moments of tension in the courtroom didn't just affect Emma. Max could feel the subtle unease that had begun to grow in the air as the judge prepared to make his ruling. There was a certain electricity in the room, an unseen force that seemed to draw them both closer to the edge of something important. Emma could feel it in her bones. She glanced down at Max, and his eyes met hers. There was no need for words. With a slight tilt of her head, Emma gave him the signal, the smallest flick of her wrist, just enough to let Max know she needed him. Max didn't hesitate. His body stiffened. His focus zeroed in on Emma, as if the rest of the courtroom had disappeared entirely. He could feel her emotions, her fear, her uncertainty, and something more, something darker, lurking just beneath the surface. The courtroom, unaware of the bond that was about to be revealed, continued to hum with tension. But for Emma and Max, there was only the quiet understanding between them, a silent agreement to act when the moment was right. Emma's hand moved just the slightest bit, and with that, Max took his first step. All eyes in the room were about to be drawn to him, and the consequences of his actions would be far-reaching. But Max had already made his decision. The time had come for him to speak, without words. The moment Max rose to his feet, the courtroom seemed to freeze. The subtle shift in the atmosphere was undeniable, and a collective gasp spread through the room. All eyes, including the judges, shifted from the proceedings to the dog standing at Emma's side. The tension in the air thickened as Max, with his golden coat gleaming under the harsh lights, began to move purposefully toward the judge's bench. His tail swished slowly, almost as if he were aware of the weight of the moment. Emma watched him with a mixture of fear and hope, her heart racing. She had only ever used that signal in the most critical moments, when she needed Max to take action. She knew it would be a bold move, one that would draw attention, but it was the only way she could think of to communicate the truth of what was happening. Max wasn't just following her lead. He was responding to something deeper, something that no one else could understand. His instincts were guiding him now, sharper than ever before. The room, once filled with the quiet murmurs of anticipation, fell into an unsettling silence. The judge, a man known for his strict, no-nonsense approach to the law, stared at Max, his eyes wide with disbelief. He wasn't sure if he was witnessing a strange coincidence or something more profound. Why was the dog walking toward him, seemingly with a purpose? Was this some kind of distraction, or was there something more to it? The judge's hand trembled slightly as he paused, his gavel hanging in the air, caught in a moment of indecision. Max didn't stop. His steady, confident steps echoed in the room, drawing all eyes to him. The courtroom, full of professionals, witnesses, and even a few spectators, was caught off guard. It wasn't every day that a courtroom drama took such a bizarre turn. But there was something about Max's presence that felt undeniable, as though he held the key to something the rest of them couldn't see. As Max approached the judge's bench, he paused just in front of it, sitting down without breaking eye contact with the judge. His golden fur gleamed under the fluorescent lights, his eyes filled with an intense, unwavering focus. Emma could see the shift in the judge's demeanor. The stern lines on his face softened just a little, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The only sounds were the faint tapping of fingers on desks and the shuffle of papers, but they felt distant and disconnected from what was happening in front of the bench. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel the heat of everyone's gaze on her, and she knew the next few moments would define everything. Her gaze never left Max. She knew he wouldn't act without a reason. He had never steered her wrong. And right now, in this moment, his presence was the key to something hidden, something critical that had been buried beneath the surface of this trial. Max had sensed it before she did. And as he sat calmly in front of the judge, waiting for the next move, Emma knew it was time to act, time to speak the truth. The courtroom held its collective breath as Max sat motionless in front of the judge's bench. The silence felt suffocating, and yet there was a strange kind of power in that stillness. Max, with his gaze unwavering, seemed to dominate the room. His golden coat shone softly in the dim light, his body relaxed but poised, like a sentinel awaiting a command. For a moment, it felt as though the very air had thickened, charged with an unspoken energy that no one could explain. The judge, still gripping his gavel, stared down at the dog before him, his mouth slightly agape. He blinked as if trying to understand what was happening. It wasn't every day that a dog, let alone one trained as a service animal, became the center of attention in a courtroom, especially not during such a crucial moment. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but there was no denying that something extraordinary was unfolding before his eyes. Max's presence was impossible to ignore. The dog had an almost regal air, standing as though he was waiting for permission to speak. His gaze never wavered from the judge's face, and the judge could feel the intensity of it. It was as though Max were pleading with him, not just to pause the proceedings, but to consider something deeper, something that the legal arguments and evidence hadn't accounted for. Something in the room had shifted, and it was clear that Max was at the heart of it. "Is there a problem, counselor?" the judge finally asked, his voice breaking the tension but betraying a hint of confusion. Emma stood slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Every eye in the room was now on her. She felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, but she knew there was no turning back. This was the moment when everything could change, when the truth she had been holding inside would finally come to light, not through words, but through the actions of the one being who truly understood her. "Your Honor," Emma said, her voice steady but soft, "Max is trying to tell you something." She gestured toward the dog, whose eyes were still fixed on the judge. There was no hesitation in Emma's voice, no fear, just a quiet conviction. "He's not just a dog. He's trained to sense when something is wrong, when something doesn't add up." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge furrowed his brow, his eyes shifting between Max and Emma. He was no fool. He could see that the young girl was serious, that this wasn't some bizarre outburst or distraction. Something about the way Max was acting was different. It was almost as if the dog were waiting for the judge to understand something that no one else could. Max, still sitting before the judge, let out a low, soft whine, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver through the room. Emma's heart raced. She knew what it meant. Max wasn't just asking for attention. He was communicating. There was something more, something important, that had been missed in the trial. The dog had sensed it, and now so had the judge. The room fell completely silent once again, the weight of the moment making time feel suspended. Everyone waited for the judge's next move. Would he dismiss this as a strange interruption, or would he take a step back and consider that there was more at play than just the legal proceedings in front of him? All Emma could do was watch, her heart pounding in her chest, hoping against hope that Max's actions would finally reveal the truth they so desperately needed. "You said." The judge's grip on his gavel tightened, but his hand remained suspended in midair. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. He had never encountered anything like this in his decades of presiding over trials. Dogs had appeared in courtrooms before, but never in such a manner, never in the middle of a critical moment like this. Max sat unwaveringly in front of him, eyes still fixed on the judge as if urging him to act. The dog's presence was too commanding to ignore, too real to dismiss as a coincidence. The judge took a deep breath, trying to regain control of the situation. His voice, when it came, was low and measured. "This is highly unusual," he said, his gaze shifting from Max to Emma, then back to the dog. "I ask again, counselor, what is the meaning of this interruption?" Emma didn't flinch. She'd expected this. She knew that the judge, trained in the law and accustomed to maintaining order, would find this hard to believe. But she couldn't ignore what she had felt, what Max had sensed. There was something in the case, something hidden, that couldn't be overlooked, and Max had picked up on it before anyone else. "He's trying to tell you something important, Your Honor," Emma replied, her voice calm but insistent. She stepped forward, her eyes locked with the judge's, as if urging him to listen, to see what she had seen. Max has always been able to sense when something's wrong. He doesn't just detect physical changes. He feels the emotions, the hidden truths that others miss. He's trying to communicate that there's something in this trial that we've overlooked, something that needs to be addressed. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The spectators, the attorneys, even the witnesses were unsure of what to make of this. Some of them exchanged confused glances, while others seemed unsettled by the possibility that a dog could somehow alter the course of a legal proceeding. The room was filled with uncertainty, but no one dared to speak out. Everyone was waiting for the judge to take charge, to make sense of this bizarre turn of events. The judge's brow furrowed as he glanced at Max again, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He wasn't a superstitious man. He wasn't one to believe in signs or symbols. But something about the dog's unyielding focus on him made him pause. He had seen countless cases, heard endless arguments, and passed many judgments, but never before had he been forced to confront the possibility that a dog could be a messenger of truth. He sighed, lowering his gavel slowly, his eyes never leaving Max. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his decision. The judge knew he had to make a choice now: dismiss this as nonsense, or entertain the possibility that something deeper was unfolding right in front of him. Court will be adjourned for a brief recess, the judge announced, his voice grave. I need time to reconsider the situation. The courtroom erupted into a mix of confusion and speculation, but the judge's decision was final. He rose from the bench, his eyes lingering on Max for a moment longer before turning to exit the chamber. Emma watched the judge leave, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had hoped for. Max had done it. He had forced the judge to stop, to pause, to question what had seemed like an open and shut case. As the room began to empty, Emma felt a sense of cautious hope wash over her. Max hadn't just changed the pace of the trial. He had made the judge reconsider everything. And with that, Emma knew that they were closer to uncovering the truth. The courtroom was buzzing with speculation. Whispers echoed from every corner as spectators, lawyers, and even the witnesses tried to make sense of what had just happened. The judge's decision to call for a recess was unprecedented. No one could quite believe what they had witnessed. A dog, sitting quietly at the judge's bench, had brought the entire trial to a halt. It was as if reality itself had bent in that brief moment, and no one knew how to handle it. Emma, however, felt a surge of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Max had done his part, had given the signal, and now it was her turn. She stood in the near silence, her fingers gently stroking Max's soft fur. He remained calm, his eyes scanning the room as if he too understood the gravity of what was unfolding. Emma, her lawyer, said, his voice low but urgent as he approached her. What exactly happened? I've never seen anything like that. Emma glanced at him, the weight of the situation settling in. She wasn't sure how to explain it, but she knew this was their chance. Max had sensed something that no one else had been able to see or understand. It wasn't just about the legal arguments or the evidence presented so far. It was about the emotions, the hidden layers beneath the surface of the case. I think Max knows something we don't, Emma replied quietly, her eyes locked on her dog. He's been telling me all along that something wasn't right. He's not just reacting to the emotions in the room. He's reacting to something deeper in the case itself, something we've missed. Her lawyer stared at her, unsure how to respond. He was a seasoned professional, but he had never encountered a situation like this. A dog could sense emotions. He knew that. But could Max really uncover the truth of a case? Could he reveal something that everyone else had missed? The judge re-entered the courtroom, his presence causing a wave of silence to sweep over the room. He appeared more composed than when he had left, but there was still an air of uncertainty about him. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, signaling the end of the recess. Everyone, please return to your seats, the judge said firmly. We will proceed with this trial. Emma took a deep breath, watching as Max sat loyally at her side, never once leaving her. She had known for a long time that this trial was more than just a simple matter of facts and law. The truth was buried beneath layers of deceit and misunderstanding, and Max had found the crack in the armor. The judge took his seat again, his eyes scanning the room. I have reviewed the materials and consulted with my colleagues, he began, his voice steady. While I still find it difficult to explain the events that occurred earlier, I cannot ignore the fact that something in this case requires further investigation. There are discrepancies that need to be addressed. We will continue the trial with a more thorough review. The words hung in the air, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. The judge was acknowledging it. He was admitting that something had been missed, something hidden in the case that needed to be explored further. It wasn't a verdict, but it was a breakthrough, and it was the first real sign of hope she had felt since the trial began. Max's ears perked up, and Emma smiled softly at him. He had done it. He had made them stop, made them reconsider. Now, they had a chance, a real chance to uncover the truth. As the judge prepared to call the next witness, Emma's mind raced. What had Max sensed? What was hidden in the shadows of the case? She knew they were getting closer, but they still had a long way to go. The courtroom may have resumed its usual rhythm, but for Emma, the battle was just beginning. Max had signaled the truth. Now, it was time to find it. The judge's decision to continue the trial was both a relief and a challenge. The courtroom had settled into an uneasy silence as the proceedings resumed, but the air was thick with anticipation. Emma could sense that the dynamics of the trial had changed. The eyes of the room were no longer just focused on the evidence and arguments. They were now looking for something deeper, something that Max had hinted at, but no one could yet fully understand. Max sat at Emma's side, still calm but alert. She could feel his quiet strength beside her. He was more than just a service dog today. He was her partner in this strange, unfolding drama. She had trusted him for years, and now he had taken the first step toward revealing the truth. But what exactly had he sensed? Emma wasn't sure, but she knew that whatever it was, it had been hidden, deliberately or not, beneath the surface. The judge cleared his throat, signaling the next witness. "Please call your next witness to the stand," he instructed the prosecutor. Emma's lawyer stood, his voice steady as he called the next witness to testify. A man in a dark suit, clearly nervous, approached the stand. His face was familiar to Emma, though she couldn't place where she had seen him before. His eyes darted around the room, betraying his unease. He took the oath, then sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Tell the court what you know about the case," the prosecutor began, his tone sharp. The man cleared his throat. I was the one who found the evidence," he said hesitantly. "The documents. They were in the office." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Documents. The key evidence in her trial had been a set of documents allegedly found in her possession, documents that had been used against her to prove her involvement in the crime she was accused of. But something about the witness's nervousness made Emma uneasy. He seemed to be hiding something. Max, as if sensing her rising discomfort, shifted slightly at her side. His body language was subtle but clear. Emma didn't have to look at him to know that he was paying attention. His instincts were sharper than anyone's, and he wasn't convinced by this man's story. Neither was she. The witness continued to speak, but Emma wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was racing. She had seen that man before at a charity event her mother had hosted years ago. He was someone who had been involved in a shady deal that had never fully come to light. The more she thought about it, the clearer the connection became. This man wasn't just a random witness. He was part of something bigger, something that linked back to her mother's business dealings. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Max had given her the clue, and now the truth was beginning to reveal itself. The documents were never meant to be found in her possession. They had been planted, but who had done it and why? The questions raced through her mind faster than she could answer them. But one thing was certain: Max had opened the door to the truth, and she was going to walk through it, no matter where it led. The courtroom buzzed with activity, but Emma's focus remained sharp. She could feel it now. The truth was within reach, and she wasn't going to let go. For O'Mini, the room was charged with an electric tension as the witness continued to speak, his voice growing more erratic, his story beginning to unravel. Emma's heart raced with every word he spoke, but it wasn't the content of his testimony that captured her attention. It was the way he spoke, the way he seemed to struggle with every detail. He was hiding something, and Emma knew it. She glanced down at Max, whose eyes were still locked on the man in the witness stand. There was no hesitation in his gaze. He was calm, but his body language said it all. The witness wasn't telling the truth. Max had always been able to sense when someone was being dishonest, and he had never been wrong before. Emma swallowed hard, her mind reeling. She had to do something. Without thinking, she stood up abruptly. "Your Honor," she called out, her voice steady despite the anxiety swirling in her chest. "I have a request." The judge, who had been following the witness's testimony with a furrowed brow, turned his attention to Emma. "Yes, counselor?" he asked, his tone clearly skeptical. "I'd like to cross-examine this witness," she said, her voice firm. "I believe there are inconsistencies in his story. He's hiding something, and I need to address it." The courtroom fell silent. Emma's lawyer shot her a surprised look, but she didn't have time to explain. This was her moment. Max had led her here, and now it was up to her to follow through. The judge's eyes flickered with hesitation, but then he nodded slowly. "Very well. You may proceed." Emma stepped forward, her pulse quickening. She turned to face the witness, her eyes narrowing with determination. "You said you found the documents, but you never mentioned how they ended up in my possession. Can you explain that?" she asked, her voice calm but piercing. The witness shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands trembling. I just found them in the office. That's all," he stammered, his voice cracking. "No," Emma said, stepping closer to the witness stand. "You found them because they were planted there. You didn't just find them. You knew exactly where they were, and you knew exactly who would be blamed." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The real question is, why did you do it?" The man's face turned pale, and for a brief moment, his eyes darted to the defense table, where Emma's lawyer sat, his expression unreadable. That small gesture didn't go unnoticed by the judge, who had been keenly observing every detail of the exchange. Emma turned her attention back to the judge. "Your Honor, I believe the witness is lying. He's part of a larger scheme, a cover-up that ties back to my mother's business dealings. This man," she gestured toward the witness, "was involved in something far bigger than what this court has been led to believe. And those documents, they were planted to frame me." The courtroom erupted in shock. The prosecutor's face twisted with disbelief, and the witnesses exchanged murmurs of confusion. But Emma stood her ground, her eyes never leaving the witness, who was now visibly sweating, his confidence shattered. Max gave a soft, low growl from beside her, as if to affirm her words. He had known it all along. The truth had been right in front of them, and now, with the witness cornered, there was nowhere to run. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I think we've reached a turning point," he said, his voice grave. "This will require further investigation. Court is adjourned for the day, and I will review the new information presented here." As the gavel came down, Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she knew this was far from over. The truth was finally out, but there was still much to uncover. With Max by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt hope stir in her chest. They were on the right path, and with Max's unwavering support, she knew they could uncover the rest of the truth. The battle wasn't over, but they had just taken the first step toward justice,